So they should change their personality. That's what we really demand. They should put their wealth into a fund, so that they have nothing to do with it. That means that they can devote themselves completely to the common good and not distracted from it. But what happens is, there may be good intentions, I don't doubt this, but when they get into it, suddenly the bourgeois comes from inside, again, and asserts himself. With Clinton, suddenly you have this David blowjob, and then you have, real estate businesses in which he was involved, and heaven knows what else he was involved in. So they come from civil society. They are supposed to become citizens. Clinton, to a large extent, was devoted to the common good, you see. But there is some residual, some damaged bourgeois residual, which then asserts itself. Or why should a Truman remain a poor shopkeeper when all the people around him become so wealthy, Or a Carter, why should he be a little guy there with a peanut producer and so on, when everybody else, goes into the billions? So the temptation of what the others are doing, now you're in the government, you have that power. Why shouldn't you use some of that power now for yourself, afterwards, that you are a little bit better off? Okay, you get all the big pension already, but where's the limit, Because what happened was, as in the civil society, the bourgeois businessmen went up. The lawyer said, why should I defend him? And I stay poor and he's rich. So the lawyer made these big prices, Then the doctor, why should I operate this guy? He gets richer and richer and I stay poor. So the payments go up. Then the professor says, I educate this guy and he has a double salary when he goes out a year later than I have. Why should I remain poor? And the other bastards, get richer and richer. And so,
I see a whole bunch of split personalities all over.
Right. So, but one must not look at it atomistically, this cook and this cook and this cook. One has to see, the system which makes them into cooks. And which would make me into a cook. Because of the plank and this little splinter in the eye, everybody who goes into this will be tempted. And to overcome this temptation, it's easy for us to sit here and say, when you go to Lansing or when you go to Washington, then remain a good citizen and be devoted to the common good. But I can imagine that this is unbelievably difficult to do that, You have a family, you want to leave something for your grandchildren, who knows what, and you see the others getting richer and richer, and you remain, in this. And all the little laws which we have, if you give up your position in the government for a year, you cannot serve a corporation or whatever. In reality, the CEOs come from the corporation, go into the government. They work a few years in the government, they go back into the corporation, When they are in the corporation, they know how to be cunning with the government. When they are in the government, they can know how to help their friends, the businessmen, and so on. So the whole thing, is sick through and through. And you don't even know where to start, except, that the state must get in control of civil society, or civil society will continue to destroy the state, and to destroy the family, and to destroy the environment. We have these environmentalists there on campus. For 45 years I'm talking with them. And they want to have, there's ozone hole, they want to close all this and so on. But they never look at the structure of civil society which has made all these holes, which is cutting down all the trees down there because they want to have animals for hamburgers. So therefore they make the forest into grassland and so on and so on. There is no end to it, And they have armies of scientists who work for them. Now it was all cold in Washington. They lie about global warming. They have not lied about global warming. There is really something, even the Pope saw it, that there is something going on. So, but there are apologists, of the businessmen, and they can buy intellectuals, they can buy whole universities. Yesterday I'm sitting in the Senate, and the president is missing. Good man, he's a Catholic and a nice fellow. But why does he come too late? Well, there are 3 former students of Western who made up a glass company in New York and they have a business of $700 million a year. So though he has to bow down before them because they give money to the university, you know. And the whole Senate sits there and waits for him because he has to talk to these three crooks because they have a $700 million business, you know. And even my friend there, the German, the Dieter Hennecke, you know, whenever we had this people, the students coming together, he would say, and you businessmen up there, look at these students, you know, they are wonderfully trained and so on. I had the feeling I was in the slave market of Atlanta, you know, where he was selling them all. That's what we're doing. We sell the slaves, you know, or the serfs or the wage laborers, you know. So, and people don't even have a feeling of dignity anymore, or feeling of honor, you know. I mean, Dieter was a wonderful person. The president was a wonderful guy, you know. But it is as if they had been marked, you know, by the slaveholders, like putting a sign on the cow. Something has been put on them, so they run around like this. Yeah. So I'm just saying all this, you know, because so that we are open for looking at alternatives, this one and others as well. And so we are moving now, you know, from Friedman to Keynes, but people should know what that means to move from Friedman to Keynes, or why we moved from Keynes to Friedman with Reagan and so on, how this all happened, you know, and what that means for individuals. And I don't think that our electorate is really adequately educated. And how can they then vote in an informed way? You know, when you go to the doctor, you should make an informed decision. I don't know how to do that neither, because I don't know enough about the heart. I don't know enough about the lungs. How can I make an informed decision? I'm depending on the specialists, you know. I can take 3 specialists and get them together or whatever. And the same thing it is in politics as well, you know. One cannot be a little storekeeper and then suddenly decide what the state should do in terms of civil society. One has to, you know, see how it all developed and what is this special development that this part of the social world, which destroyed everybody else, was our beginning. That's unique, you know. So we cannot, if we want to learn from the Romans or the Greeks or whatever, with them it was all different. The state was always there, and with the Germans and the French, you know, they all had a strong state before civil society suddenly came and revolutionized it all, and produced at the same time a 4th estate which will overthrow the bourgeoisie. So, and they don't even know it yet, that they will overthrow the bourgeoisie, because they have marked them too with that stamp. I wonder if all these farmers and people who came from Europe, you know, these millions, and then went into the tenement houses, what they did to them for generations and generations, that they are willing to suffer day after day these lies and this abomination. They lose their pension for which they have worked their whole life long. They lose their jobs. And when they lose their jobs, they lose their health insurance, you know. And they go like cows go into the slaughterhouse. Now, in order to more consoling thing, we had that, you know, in a little capsule on Western, and I observed that since 45 years now. The people are suffering. That means the students of the faculty. Faculty is suffering. There is some vice president, you know, and then one day, suddenly, they rent a big hall somewhere downtown or here, and they put up some microphones, and then they all talk through these microphones. And at the end of this 1 or 2 hours, there is no vice president anymore. There is no provost anymore. And recently, most recently, there was suddenly no president anymore. I think that the whole, that somehow Western, you know, and many other places, are little capsules how the American people as a whole act. That they suffer so much does not mean that they are stupid. I think that they know instinctively what's going on, and all what they need would be somebody who would give it words, who would signify things, and they would recognize it. But they feel very well that they are being had. And then there will come the time, as it did again and again. It happened during the time I'm here, maybe 4 times that this happened. big room, microphones, statements, and next day the vice president was fired. The last provost, even said, he said, there is Professor Siebert. He loves Western so much that he will not retire. But someday he will retire too. And she was fired next day. There was nothing left of her anymore. So sometimes the ironical things are happening, So that is, as an image for what the whole nation may be like. I don't think that they are so stupid that they don't know what's happening, but I think they are willing to suffer to an extreme, and at the extreme they will fire somebody, and possibly the whole system. But the dangerous thing is that they will be angry, and that they will not be educated enough, and then it will be a tsunami. And they will not only kill the guilty ones, they will kill a lot of them who are not guilty. It will be a natural event, like the French Revolution was. And so that is what I'm afraid of. If we do not, look at options at the right time and inform ourselves, Henry Ford was not a stupid guy. So they should say, why did Henry Ford in the last Depression, take this position? Why was he for National Socialism, of all things? Why did he take Hitler's big decoration? Also, Father Coughlin was not a stupid guy. Why was he first a Roosevelt liberal and then changed over and became a fascist? And so on. We should look at those things seriously. And even if we hate the fascists, then maybe, in spite of the fact that they did many stupid things, maybe they did some things right. How did Hitler get jobs for 7 million people before he started the armament? How was Stalin able to prevent the whole depression in Russia, in which we were cooking for 10 years and only got out by the war? So we have to learn from our enemies too. And so what we have here with the Pope, that's only one option, right? But we need all the help which we can get. Okay, do we have anything about this, what I said? So that was the timeline thing. I wanted to do it the last time, but I just did it today. Okay, we had our reading. So far we have discussed the tradition of Catholic social encyclical letters from Leo the 13th. That is Neo Novarum. New things are happening. The new things which happened was that the traditional commodity production, where the carpenter and the blacksmith and the farmer produce their butter and their chairs and so on, it becomes industrialized. First manufacture, and through manufacture then into industry. Then comes Fordism, Taylorism and so on, the assembly lines and mass production of things. I recently had a bay window. The bay window was still made by hand, so in a manufacturing process. But the division of labor from manufacture to industry is pushed forward and more differentiated, until you have smallest parts which are produced, and it becomes more and more stupid all the time. And the more stupid it becomes, the more it can be automated, and you have the automation process coming in industry for airplane production and car production and so on.
And the more dehumanizing.
Yeah, the more dehumanizing. So the more intelligent the production becomes and the division of labor, the more stupidifying it becomes for the people who are involved in it. And it is then, redeeming when one can automate or computerize, because that may take a lot of tedious type of work away. And apropos tedious, is then Americans don't want to do that anymore. And suddenly we get 12 million people from Mexico or whatever who take those jobs because Americans don't want it anymore, or Germans don't want it anymore, or French don't want it anymore, So you have suddenly these boring jobs which are still left and not automated are given to people who do not belong to one's nation, but are secondary people, who do the low jobs. And the Turks all came into Germany and did this, and then suddenly, it changes again, and the cheap labor attracts capital to Africa and so on, and then you have all the Turks sitting there and on welfare, and you want to have them out, and then you have the hate against the foreigners and all that stuff. So, okay. So this from Leo the 13th to Benedict the 16th, the Caritas in Veritate, the encyclicals are based on the Torah and the New Testament, and that's why we read it there. The response to the suffering of the people under capitalism as the private appropriation of collective labor, that's the definition of capitalism, or industrial commodity production, as I mentioned that in exchange. We call the first chapter of the Capital, which the popes are responding to, the title is Commodity. Commodity and money. And that's the doubling up. He could have saved that money, because money is also a commodity. It's the universal commodity which can be exchanged against all other commodities. And so whenever you say Marxism, say commodity, because that's the core, not democracy or whatever. The commodity is the key through which everything in capitalism is unkeyed. So when you look at television tonight, every 5 minutes there's a commodity. Advertising, not the real commodity, an image of the commodity. So an image of a Volkswagen with a little blondie sitting in there. And then that stimulates your libido, and so we have this whole social psychology, the whole psychoanalysis, the unconscious, like Odysseus, finding that need which isn't there, producing a need which isn't there, to hook him. That is happening day after day. I mean, I always jump over those advertisements, so I turn to the next channel and so on. But people, if you have a nice movie, they kiss each other, suddenly a soap, they advertise for soap. And I counted in Frankfurt recently, there were 33 advertisements with one kiss and the other one. I mean, this makes people neurotic. I mean, what this is doing, to the whole psychic apparatus is unbelievable. And so alienation and insanity is the same thing originally. Even the words are the same thing. The doctors of insanity in France and Spain were called alienating specialists of alienation or whatever. Okay, so we call the Catholic position solidarism, which is situated between liberalism and fascism on one side, and socialism and communism on the left. On the right, can solidarism help us in the present economic and political crisis? We must see solidarism in a broader timeline, and we looked at the timeline now. So we can add another thing, the axis time. So all the great world religions which we have now go back to 500, like Buddhism, or 600, 700 before Christ. So these four cultures climax, they become high cultures, and in these high cultures you have high religions. And these high religions, particularly the three Abrahamic religions, have come to us. So so that we know what the context is. Okay, now 500 Christians, time diagnosis, something happened since we came together. 500 Christians have been killed in Nigeria in revenge for 300 Muslims who have killed in January 2010. So shepherds did that, killed those Christians. It seems that there is an economic reason for it, so we would have to analyze this, by commodity analysis, what this economic thing is. But it is, of course, unbelievably sad that members of the same Abrahamic faith community are killing each other in Iraq, and in Pakistan we had explosions again yesterday where 50 people or whatever were killed, and the same thing in Afghanistan, and Christians are killing Muslims, Muslims are killing Christians, Jews are killing Muslims, Muslims are killing Jews, and so on. That one sits quietly there in the churches and all that and have nothing to say about this whole thing. Is just an unbelievable moral catastrophe. The two elections of Bush was a moral catastrophe of the greatest proportion, and nobody reflects on it. The priests are frightened to talk about it because they don't want the thing to split the community. Suddenly the right guys and the left guys, are at each other's throat, and in order to keep peaceful, they don't say anything.
When you have this, young people become alienated from their religion in
Right.
groups, don't they? You see this,
Right.
like
Every day.
after these young people are beaten up in Iran for this two sects are killing each other in mass, there's something happens to persons, you know that?
Definitely, yeah. Right.
They become alienated from their own roots.
From their own humanity and
Yeah.
from their friends and from their wives and the Vietnam people, you know that 53 or 1,000 died in Vietnam, but the same number killed itself at home. And some of them are still going into the mountains to kill themselves. And when they are in the family, the wives say, he's not here, even if he's here. You know, he went on a fishing trip for 4 weeks and then he came back. But when he is back, it is as if he was still on the fishing trip. So, and this is now, you know, the Vietnam War is over for decades already, you know. And there is a new thing when they come home, and many of them have mental problems, you know, which you could say originally problems of alienation, alienated from their communities and from their wives and from their children and so on, to the point of insanity. So, and you know, this...
Well, this is happening with American soldiers
Right, exactly.
who are in psychotherapy,
Right.
but the military does not let the psychotherapist or the veteran deal with the fact that he killed and injured and violated, you know, other people's homes.
Right.
Here's an article on it. It's
Yeah.
that they are so traumatized they
Right.
can't deal with
Yeah.
their problem.
Now they're
Trauma.
reliving all that all the time, and
Right,
so
yeah.
when they're home with their family and wives, they're not even home.
They're not even there. Well, even if they don't have families, they come back dealing with, they have a sense of guilt for all
Yeah,
what they
right.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you,
No,
Well, they have some kind of relationships around, but I mean, even that they don't have a wife.
look
or
how many people who back from Iraq and also Afghanistan have killed themselves.
Right, the suicide rate has increased continually.
Right.
Yeah, right.
There are more Vietnam veterans who committed suicide than were killed in Vietnam.
Exactly, yeah, that's what I say, you know, I think it's
Yeah, we'll get
53,000. Yeah, so, and I mean, the military knows that all, but the question is, you know, there is this issue which, when you look at the canon law, which the Pope represents, you know, by 1200 there was a collection of the canon law by Gratian, and there is this statement in there, when the king declares a war, or that there are enemies, and the enemies have to be fought, then you are not killing. This is something else, you know, when the king identifies the enemy, then you can kill the enemy. It's not really killing, when you're certainly not murder. The Decalogue says you should not murder, so it's not murdering, it's just like killing an animal or whatever, you know. And this goes through the whole tradition, the religious tradition. So when you know, Bush says these are many, they have weapons of mass destruction, now you can kill them, then this should work, you know. But it does not really work on the psychological and on the ethical level. And you can see that with all the wars. Just a few examples there. When I go to Dubrovnik, you know, I had always to have a communist partner. And so one was Wurtzan, he has died now, a beautiful guy. One day he suddenly wants to invite Professor Luckmann from Germany. And I did not know, you know, why he wanted to do that, but I said, of course, you know, I had to decide, and I said, bring Luckmann in. But I didn't know why he wanted to do that. So Luckmann came, he gave a lecture, and it was strangely fascist, that lecture. And I thought, why did he bring him? And then slowly it came to me the following way. My co-director, the communist co-director, was a partisan under Tito. And he interfered with Father Luckmann, the father of Professor Luckmann, who was a Yugoslav. And he had visited, he was an Ustascha general, and he had visited Mussolini. And he came back at night and landed on the coast near Dubrovnik. And Wurtzan, my partner there, caught him, court-martialed him, and executed him. And now he wanted to make something good by inviting his son to come back to his homeland. This was extraterritorial, where I have my course. So then he took him to Split, and there the students boot him out. And later on I invited him to come back because I thought we should be open, you know. But you see that something had been done. This was an Uster general, he was a fascist, he was executed, it was with Mussolini, and so there were all kinds of good reasons, but it was still there as a problem. He had to make it good somehow, and he tried, it almost worked, only the Yugoslav students didn't cooperate. Another thing, Ivan Supek, president of the University of Zagreb, and we were good friends, and he died recently too, and before he died we were sitting in the Hotel Argentina and had breakfast together. And so Ivan suddenly said, you know, I dream every night of those Germans whom I have killed. And they don't let me go. It's horrible. I wake up, I scream. And I said, well, Ivan, you were a student of Heisenberg, you are a quantum physicist, you are very good in mathematics, so they probably put you into the artillery. So then you killed Germans, probably, maybe, but they were 10 miles away, they were 20 miles away. You never saw any German whom you killed. How can you dream of them? He said, yeah, that's very rational. I mean, it's true, I was in the artillery and I never saw whom I killed, and so, but they're coming anyway. Then I said, but you had the right to kill them because they came into your country and you had to defend your country. Yeah, he said, of course it was right. I mean, it was ethical, but they're coming anyway. See, people have to deal with those things, and whatever the king says or whatever the organization, ultimately you are left alone, you know, with this problem. And I discussed that with
What country was this?
Yugoslavia. But I had the same thing with McGovern, you know. McGovern bombed Frankfurt, you know, and I was there when he bombed Frankfurt with the American Air Force in daytime, and the British bombed it at nighttime. I saw the women and the children burning in the tar, you know, with Midland, their napalm for Midland and so on. And we had a discussion, McGovern and I, when I was his campaign manager, and I said, you know, I flew ME-109 and I shot as many people down of you as possible because, you know, you bombed those people in the basement and so on. And we, you know, we remained friends, and he thought he was right because he fought fascism, and I thought I was right because I defended those women and children. And so we are dying with a good conscience because each of us thinks we did right, but we both killed, you know. I don't know exactly if I killed because I shot them down, 18 of them, 12 people in each of them, plane, in the hope that they all, you know, jumped out or whatever. But this, you know, this was a long time after the war, and that stays with people, and they have to see how they deal with this. If they are religious or not does not matter, you know. Even if you become a humanist like Wirtz or whatever, you still have those problems, you know, from these wars. Wirtz was something else. The monasteries, Franciscans and Dominicans, they all were Ustasha people. Why Catholicism has this tendency, you know, toward fascism in Spain, in Portugal, in Italy, and so on. This is another thing one should explore.
Can I ask you, because you brought up a question, I was just reading that the nominalists were very popular originally in the Franciscan movement.
Right. Yeah.
Is this a continuation, you think, in their thinking from where St. Francis
Well,
started?
I don't know if it has something to do with nominalism, you know. And Wilhelm of Ockham was the first great nominalist, and he belonged to an order. And then Gabriel Biel was the teacher of Luther, so the whole Lutheran movement became nominalistic. That means they will all be de-Hellenized. And we mentioned already that the Pope has great problems, you know, with de-Hellenization, and that's another theme. But leave that aside for a moment, you know, why these Franciscans were fascists or these Dominicans. But they had guns and they defended their monasteries. So Wirtz stormed a monastery near Dubrovnik, you know. And all the guys who were wearing weapons now, these monks, they were shot when they stormed it. But there was one guy who was sitting in the hospital of the monastery, and he had no weapons at all. He was just sitting in his bed, and they shot him too. It is this guy there, you know, who had no weapons and couldn't defend himself, which was moving around in the soul of this wonderful, was a huge guy, Wirtz, this wonderful soul, the most honest person I've ever met in my whole life. and he was a communist, and he was in the Comintern in Moscow, so he had a high position and high connections, but he never, overcame fascist monk who was sitting in his bed. The others, maybe that was legitimate, but legitimate or not, the psyche, and particularly the unconscious, is not satisfied by saying the king says you can kill those people. You still have to deal with it on a level. There is a man downtown here in Kalamazoo who, since the Second World War, wakes up every week and screams, and his whole family is prepared for this. They had to go through this week after week. What did he do? He was a soldier in the Normandy, and in the Normandy he was in different battles, and he killed a lot of Germans. But one day, and this does not bother him really, but one day he had to take a prisoner back from the front into the prison camp. And he was a little guy, like me at that time. He was 16 years old or 17 or whatever. So he gave up his weapons, he surrendered, the little guy, and he took him to the prison camp. And suddenly, on the way, he remembers that his friend was killed by the Germans 2 days ago. And a rage overcame him, and he shot that little guy, dead. And it is that little guy who appears in his dream all the time. So, and nobody, no church or saying, well, it was emotional or whatever, it does not help. The little guy always comes back. So this, is the other side of all these conflicts. But let me just say another time diagnosis there. The District of Columbia has legalized gay marriages after five states had done so. So that's the sixth state, it's not a state, but and hundreds of them were married last week and so on. Now, that means, of course, for us, that means that secularization continues. If this is a religious country or a Christian country, one thing to see it are the laws, Jesus was against divorce. If you divorce a woman, you make her an adulteress. If you marry a divorced woman, you live in adultery. Jesus thought of monogamy as something very sacred, and it was not to be disturbed, and so on. And there were other rabbis who said the same thing. And what are we doing? We are, since 1880, every state introduced divorce laws. And recently, Ireland even, Catholic Ireland, and also Catholic Spain, and Catholic Portugal, and so on. There you see that the step-by-step secularization continues. And if you have, say, 99% in the questionnaire of Americans say they believe in God, means absolutely nothing. Who is this God? Where does he come from? Do people pray to him? Do they sacrifice for him? Whatever, and so on. But this abstract statement, they believe in God or something higher or whatever, does not help very much. So, though, what does that mean for us now? If the world becomes more and more secular, will they listen to a religious man? Will they listen to solidarism? See, the word solidarism already is a betrayal in a certain sense, because it was the labor movement which transformed and translated the love of the neighbor into solidarity. So that means the Pope accepted a translation of a religious concept into a secular one already, and this is how it may be in the future. And if the secularization cannot be stopped, and if, on the other hand, there is some semantic, material, and potential in the world religions, and when that has helped us in our humanization process, then we must ask ourselves if we can allow to migrate certain religious contents into the secular discourse and into secular community action, political action, economic action. And those contents, religions, which cannot migrate into that discourse will be lost. That is what I would predict for the future. So the question is, are there things in this encyclical, what he says about truth and what he says about love and so on, which are worthwhile to migrate into a secular situation? So that we will have people later on who will live a secular life, but some of them are motivated humanistically, and some of them may still be motivated religiously. Obama grew up without any religion. He converted to Christianity in Chicago because he saw that the Chicago churches, they're Baptist or whatever, did a tremendous amount of things for the people in the slums. That convinced him. But he still talks and walks like a secular person. But sometimes it seems, with his equilibrium which he has, which is astonishing, he is in an insane asylum and behaves sanely, which everybody admires, even those who are disappointed, still admire this. This is a God-given grace which this man has, to be in an insane asylum and behave, as the only sane person still left in the White House. So this is, amazing. So, and that is how it may be in the future. So secularization continues. This is just a sign of it. The churches, the world religion, the three Abrahamic religions, they are all against gay, not only marriages, they are against homosexuality and lesbianism. In the Torah, they are sentenced to death. And in the Holy Quran, there's something similar, and the Christians are similar, and so on. So on one side you have this position, on the other side you have secularization on the basis of equal rights. The homosexuals have the same rights like the heterosexuals, and so, but this is a completely line of argumentation. That means the Civil Rights Declaration of 1776, 1789, and 1945, and so on, cannot be accepted by a mullah, for instance. The mullah cannot accept it because they have no divine authority. That's it. So they are relative, There's nothing absolutely binding. The three Abrahamic religions, the Pope has an absolute ethics. Modern people have a situation ethics. Things change from one context to the other. So, and this is where nominalism comes in, because with Wilhelm of Ockham, God is not logos anymore, intellect, but his will. And he can will on one day that you should not kill, and next day he can will that you should kill. And you have to be obedient to that will. But it means also that man, as the image of God, he also becomes will. And the whole philosophy from the 19th century on is not intellect first, but will first. And what makes Hitler's writing so attractive even today still is that will element in it, and he had a will to the last moment of his life and his existence.
Rudy, you got about quarter two. Do you want to?
Yeah, we want to do that. Okay, so that is, the Pope continues to forbid the use of condoms in Africa in spite of the fact that there is this AIDS and so on. So on one side we have the thing, sexuality has a purpose, God gave it a purpose, we have to follow that God-given purpose, and on the other hand, therefore we cannot interrupt it by condoms, so you have no condoms, and AIDS goes further and further and so on. And people will not say, the Pope may say, we obey God and Providence will take care of it. People know that Providence very often does not take care of it, and so he will be made responsible for what he says. So that is something new in modernity. The Pope, whatever reason he has, whatever he says, he is responsible for the consequences. So if, for instance, he says you must be monogamic, and the guy has to send 3 wives away and keeps one of them, what happens to the other 3? They go into prostitution, or they kill the one which he keeps. The Pope is responsible for this. He cannot say, I announce God's word, and God will provide. The modern people don't let him get away with this. That's another thing. So this is the context in which the Pope operates. He is not in the Catholic world anymore. He is in a world which has become more and more secularized, and a world in which, if he speaks in the public sphere, he is held responsible for whatever his words, the consequence which his words have. And every word in this encyclical, the recommendation which he makes, and people apply this recommendation, he is responsible for what comes from it, for the Catholics who follow him and preach it, and so on. So this is a time diagnosis, and we will go on solidarism and the market and so on the next time. Okay, let's see a little bit of Thomas More, not Thomas More, Michael More. Michael More. Why do we show it? Because we want to connect the encyclical which the Americans seen. And this is the movie about health insurance, and the president stays at home, he doesn't go to Australia, because in the next weeks he will fight that through in Congress with the reconciliation mechanism. And so that can connect what we say here with the American scenery. We started already with the other one, Roger and Me, and that is our second movie. And then we have the other one, right, on capitalism. We
I
can-
get it, dude.
Yeah, very good.
Have you seen it yet?
Yeah, I have seen it, yeah. Yeah, we'll do that next time. What happened to David?
His mom said that he was on the way from Grand Rapids.
Oh, okay, so he didn't make it then, forgot.
He said, but Rudy has that thing tonight, he won't miss it. Optimistic.
Hope everything's okay.
Mike
Did we
said-
turn the light down a little?
Yeah, Mike said he got tired of doing these movies about these peripheral issues and not hitting the core of what the problem is, and that's why he did that capitalism and love story.
Yeah, right.